Well, counties across northeast Wisconsin reporting high voter turnouts in Tuesday's state election. Political experts tell Action 2 News the results show a Democratic upsurge, but it's not likely to flip Republican-leaning counties permanently. In the First Alert update, Drew Best brings us more on how this turnout compares to previous spring elections.
With the state Supreme Court race garnering nationwide attention at the top of the state ballot, Wisconsin voters flooded to the polls, each county seeing at least a 5% voter increase from the last spring election in 2023. While some counties needed to print more ballots, Green Bay City Clerk Celestine Jeffries says she felt prepared.
Talking to some of my other clerk colleagues, they also had seen an uptick in interest and participation late last week. And so on Monday, I ordered more ballots. So nobody had to call me, no poll worker had to call me yesterday to say I'm out of ballots.
Green Bay voters in the April election turned in more than 30.6 thousand ballots, an increase of nearly 5,000 from 2 years ago. For Jeffries, it's a sign of encouragement.
From a clerk's perspective, I'm hoping that Wisconsinites are like, yes, April is just as important as November.
While Tuesday's vote count did not rival the presidential election, counties across northeast Wisconsin saw major voting increases from 2023. Three of those counties, Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago, saw liberal Judge Susan Crawford lead the popular vote just a few months after those counties' votes went to President Donald Trump. Political expert and Lawrence University professor Gerald Poder tells me he does not think the blue-leaning results will repeat.
It does have meaning, but it doesn't, I think, presage a shift towards the Democrats in the future in this area.
Poder feels another reason for the high turnout was Democratic voters looking to bounce back after the November election.
Your voters are angry, they are frustrated, they need an outlet. And it did not surprise me that more Democrats than Republicans turned out for this election.
Wisconsin voters will now wait until next year to vote on a statewide race, which once again will feature an open seat on the state Supreme Court. I'm Drew Best for Action 2 News.